Hello, Rob McNeilly here again, and welcome to the third video in this series. This third video is, I would say, the most important part of the learning, and also the simplest. In the problem-solving approach, which is very firmly entrenched in the medical model, the very important first step is to find out some information about what the problem is, what caused it, what makes it worse, and so on. So that when we gather in a problem-solving approach, gather information, we are primarily interested to make a diagnosis. And once we've made a diagnosis, then we can start the treatment. And the prime concern in the background for the problem-solving approach is to fix something that's broken, defective, needs attention. Now, what we're exploring in this approach, after Erickson, is not so much a problem-solving approach, but rather a solution approach, a solution-generating approach, a solution-evoking approach. And so in this approach, in the solution approach after Erickson, we're actually not interested in gathering information to make a diagnosis. We're much more interested to find out with this person, with each individual person, what their experience is as part of their unique experience of the problem that they're having, so we can explore with them what experience, what resource, what behaviour they've lost touch with, got out of connection with, so then we can help them to connect with it, to reconnect with it, or to learn it. One of the most succinct examples I've come across came from Erickson, how surprising, and he told me that a woman rang him saying she had been washing her hands obsessively for 12 years. And he was very interested to find out what she used to do with the hands 13 years ago. He wasn't interested in what caused it. He wasn't interested in treating an obsession. He was interested to find out with her about what was going to be helpful. So in the problem-solving approach, in the medical model approach, a diagnosis is essential. And without a diagnosis, how can we solve the problem? In the solution approach, a diagnosis is, if anything, an impediment. It's something to put aside, to somehow kind of get disconnected with, so that we can look directly at the client and their experience rather than looking at them through the filter of the diagnosis. That way, we are never treating anxiety. We're never treating depression. We're never treating PTSD. We're never treating OCD. All of these alphabets can be put aside, and we can start to have a conversation with a person. Now, for example, if someone has had something traumatic happen to them in the past, if they go to therapy and the therapist is interested to solve the problem from the medical model, which is entrenched in psychiatry and a lot of psychology and many other approaches, then the therapist will want to know about what was the trauma. They want to know, okay, this person has had a trauma, so they're very likely then, pretty quickly, to have a diagnosis of PTSD. But what if, as well as the trauma, this person finds themselves being anxious. So then they might have an additional diagnosis of anxiety. Perhaps if the trauma has been going on for some time and the sequelae are still troubling, this person might get depressed. So then they're suffering from depression. It may be that as a way of dealing with the recurrent issues of the trauma, they become involved in some kind of repetitive ritual, checking the light switches, washing their hands and so on. So then they're suffering from an obsession. So in the literature, some people talk about comorbidity. So that then someone, instead of having had a trauma, they are suffering from OCD, PTSD, anxiety and depression. These are comorbid conditions. So then we've got 4 conditions to treat here. And fine. And in the solution approach, instead of trying to work out which to treat first or how to go about treating this very increasingly complex situation, we can find out with this person who has had a trauma, in what way is this trauma still troubling them? Are they getting flashbacks? Do they feel frightened that it might happen again? Are they worried about the feeling of the future? Are they feeling helpless about their future? Are they having trouble sleeping? Has it interfered with their relationship? Are they having difficulty getting back to work? Then we can start to work directly with this individual client's experience, help them to find, in ways that we've been exploring in the previous 2 videos, what's missing for them, what resource, what behaviour, what emotion, what attitude is missing, that if they had it they'd be okay. We can help them to then explore other areas of their life where they have this resource so they can bring it to the problem. Or if there's nothing that's easily accessible, we can introduce the idea of learning. In that way, we are always having a conversation with an individual human being, helping them, each one, to reconnect, to become more of who they're able to be, to become more whole. And the word whole and the word healing come from the same root etymologically. So when we can help someone to be more whole, we can help their healing. And I find, and other people who have followed these principles have told me that they find it is so much more respectful, so much more human, so much more effective to work in this way with each individual person and their experience, instead of having to take, which from the solution approach is an unnecessary deviation, unnecessary sidetrack to find out the diagnosis and then treat. So that's my invitation. Anytime someone says, I'm depressed or anxious or I've got post-traumatic syndrome, an obsession, instead of trying to treat it, my invitation is to explore the principles that we've been looking at, that I've spoken about, and that I'm inviting you to play with and learn and see how it works for you, and see how we can help each individual then be more connected with their resourcefulness, to help them to connect specifically for what in particular is going to be helpful for them, so that they can be whole, so they can heal, so that they can get on with their life. So it's a very simple approach, very straightforward, very uncomplicated, very much related to everyday life. Someone was telling me the other day that therapy is a very peculiar, traditional therapy is a very peculiar way of dealing with things. They said that if your plumbing was blocked and you called a plumber, and the plumber comes and the plumber said, "How long has it been blocked? How do you feel about this?" And then says, "Well, we've got a diagnosis of a blocked drain. Now, I'm going to think about how to treat this drain best, and I'll come back in a week, and then you can tell me what's different, whether the treatment is working, and so on." The plumber is not interested in the cause, not interested in how we feel about it, not interested in exploring. He's interested in just getting things moving. And it's going to be different for different blocked pipes, of course. So I don't mean to trivialize the problem-solving approach. It is really superb for dealing with many, many conditions, particularly physical conditions, broken legs, pneumonia, appendicitis, and so on. And that problem-solving approach is of course wonderful for dealing with computers, with cars, with any mechanical situations. Turns out that human beings are not mechanical. We're not machines. We're organic creatures. So that's my invitation. When someone comes with a problem, instead of taking that sidetrack of making a diagnosis and then looking up and finding out how to treat that, whether to do this or that or the other treatment protocol, see what happens if you explore with each individual, as we've been playing with in the videos, the first two videos, and see what you can find there. See what you can discover there. See what's helpful there. So, thank you for being willing to be part of this series, and I would be delighted if you would leave a comment about what your reflections are, and in particular, if you could see what happens if you try this approach out and leave a note about what you discovered was useful. Thanks.